We all remember that one classmate who wouldn't wear deodorant to gym class, right? Like, things may have started out smelling just fine, but after a couple rounds of volleyball, that's when the air started to get a little thicker. And before you know, you'd have to walk all the way to the cafeteria to avoid the damp stench of rotten onions and asparagus. Well, guys, we're sorry to say, but that's pretty much what happens to your money if you develop bad habits that go unchecked. Things may start out just fine, but eventually somebody starts to sweat and things end up smelling like a rotten heap of
So today we'll be talking about 14 financial habits to avoid if you want to avoid turning your finances into a rotten heap of vegetables. And we'll also be talking about what to do instead so you can become the master of your finances instead of your finances becoming the master of you.
Let's get into it.
Financial habit number 1 you want to avoid is not setting and pursuing goals with your money. A goal is something you decide for yourself that basically says, this is where I want to be at this point in the future. This is my choice of destination. Some examples would be, I want to save $200 a month a year from now. Or by the time I'm 40, I want to be a millionaire.
So goals are extremely important because not only do they give you something to work toward, but they also give you a direction, kind of like a compass. At least for Brittany and I, we would have never been able to pay off $120,000 of debt without goals. Definitely not in 3 years. We also wouldn't have been able to save a 6-month emergency fund. We also wouldn't have been able to amass a 6-figure investment portfolio. And more than likely, without goals, we'd still be deeply in debt, living paycheck to paycheck. So goals are extremely important. They can really turn your life around financially if you do them right. But not only is it important to set goals, it's also equally important to pursue them.
And goals that aren't pursued, in our opinion, are basically just dreams. And there's nothing wrong with dreams, but you should be creating actual steps to achieve those dreams.
It's kind of like what Earl Nightingale once said. He said, people with goals succeed because they know where they're going. All you need is the plan, the roadmap, and the courage to press on to your destination. So one of our biggest financial goals is to become financially independent, which for us means to create a passive income stream or streams that pay us $4,000 a month. Once we do this, we don't have to work anymore if we don't want to. So where do you want to go with your money? What do you want your future to look like?
And number 2 is operating your finances without a money plan or a budget.
So Benjamin Franklin once said that success is the residue of planning. And a monthly money plan or budget is a great way to plan. And a lot of people have this stigma about a budget. It's like it's just constraining or it doesn't allow them to do what they want. That's not the purpose of a budget at all. It's just really to put you back in charge of your spending. You telling your money where to go on paper before you spend it.
And by doing this, you're not only creating a visual picture of your finances, you're also creating transparency between you and your spending. So that way you're in control of things.
A money plan will show you 3 things. 1, how much it costs you to survive month to month, so things like food, water, shelter, clothing, things like that. 2, how much you're spending on things that you don't necessarily need to survive, so think of Starbucks coffee every morning or a Netflix subscription. These are things that you can cut out of your budget or decrease spending on if you need to. And 3, how much money you have left over at the end of the month to save or invest or do other things with.
So by doing this, instead of wondering at the end of the month where all your money went, you will know exactly where it went because it's you who planned where everything was going to go at the first of the month when you made your budget. And for Mike and I, we would say this was a huge reason why we were able to accomplish all of our financial goals that we set out to achieve. There are also some great apps out there like Mint.com and EveryDollar that will help you plan and budget your money. And if you don't like to link your bank account to apps, you can download our budget template down below. It's free, no email address is required.
And the 3rd financial habit you want to avoid is buying things you can't afford.
And I'm completely guilty of this. So even though I wouldn't go into the red on my bank account, I wouldn't keep track of what I was spending and where it was going month to month. And because of this, I didn't have a good direction or plan for my money that would have helped my future instead of hurting it.
And that's pretty much the reason we're putting this one after having a money plan or a budget. And that's just because once you finish your budget, you either know how much money you have left over at the end of the month or how much money you're going over what you're earning every month. So if you're going over what you're earning in terms of your spending, then you'll have to look at those things that you're spending money on that you don't really need to survive, like Starbucks coffee or whatever, and maybe think about cutting back on those so you can have a surplus every month and maybe think about investing or doing things that can grow your wealth rather than take away from it.
And number 4, going about your life without an emergency fund.
And this isn't the most enjoyable thing to think about. Like we all wish the weather were nice outside every day of the year, but the truth is it's just not. Nasty weather happens, storms happen, and unfortunately emergencies are going to happen. You could lose your job, a family member could go through some big medical event. That's happened to Brittany and I on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
We just saw last year the entire world could shut down for a few months, or more than that, just depending on where you live. But the point is, things happen, and it's very important to be prepared for an emergency when one does happen, so it doesn't create another emergency in your financial life as well.
And having a money plan will help you tremendously when you're trying to plan out how much you need to save for an emergency fund. And this is because you'll know exactly how much your expenses are to live off of month to month. So your bare necessities like food, water, clothing, shelter, utilities, gas to go to and from work. And the typical emergency fund is anywhere from 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, not your income, just your expenses. And some people go all the way up to 12 months. That's a little much for us, so we decided to settle on 6 months worth of expenses.
But it really just depends on your risk tolerance. Something big that Brit and I noticed as soon as we finished funding our 6-month emergency fund is this peace that immediately came over our lives. It's like we could kind of sit back, relax a little bit. We have this
breathe a little bit.
Yeah, we have this big cash buffer between us and things that could potentially happen. It's just nice.
And the 5th thing you want to avoid is having a credit card as your emergency fund.
Yeah, so if you're relying on a credit card to pay for an emergency, that probably means that you don't have the cash to pay for it yourself. Which means if an emergency were to happen, you're much more likely to go into credit card debt for it, where the interest rates are 20% and more. This is something that will easily make the emergency that already exists much bigger and much more worse.
And that's very different if you have the cash for it and you want to use your credit card for, let's say, the cashback rewards or an extra layer of fraud protection, and then you immediately pay the transaction off from the money in your bank account. But the point is, don't let an emergency in one area of your life spread to other areas.
Pay for it with cash.
Yeah.
Number 6, ignoring your spending. So this one's kind of like ignoring the law of cause and effect. If you're ignorant of your spending habits, that means you're much more likely to be surprised at your financial situation than you would be if you were paying attention to your spending habits. It also means you're much more likely to go into consumer debt, which is not a good thing.
So after you create a budget, you need to keep track of what you're spending so you don't accidentally overspend. And we do this on the back of our budget, so we'll print it out and we'll write columns for every category we have allocated all of our money to go to. So for example, our food budget, we will write down everything we spent on food for the month, and under the gasoline column, we'll write down everything we spent on gas. You can also do this on a spreadsheet, and apps like Mint.com and EveryDollar can do this for you as well.
And number 7 is not monitoring your bank accounts for fraud. And this isn't something that's necessary to do every day, but maybe once every few days, 3 or 4 days may not be a bad idea. Just to go over your accounts, reconcile everything, make sure what you're being charged is actually what you spent in the store, and that there's no fraudulent activity or anything going on. Sometimes banks will try to contact you if they think there's fraudulent activity happening, but I don't think all banks do this. So just recently, somebody got a hold of my debit card information, made a fraudulent charge to my account, and if I hadn't been paying attention to it, and if my bank hadn't contacted me, I wouldn't have been able to take care of it as quickly, and it probably could have been a lot worse.
And number 8, having a consumer mentality. This basically means habitually buying things that will bring your net worth down over time. Some examples of this would be most cars, boats, computer gadgets you only use once, furniture, and anything else you could think of that you would be able to finance for 12 to 72 months.
But here's the nuance with this one, guys. A lot of the time you have to buy things that go down in value just for your day-to-day lives. So for example, more than likely you're gonna need a car to go to work, you're gonna need some sort of a bed to sleep in, and you're gonna need some sort of a computer to work on, whether that be for school or for your job. The problem comes in when buying things like this becomes a habit rather than just out of, a necessity. If you wanna become wealthy, if you wanna become a millionaire or leave some sort of financial legacy for your kids or something like that, you don't wanna make a habit of buying things that go down in value until your net worth can support it. For example, Brit and I have vowed not to buy a brand new car again until our net worth is around $1 million or so. And that's just because, we don't want to buy a $40,000 car and have it depreciate $20,000 over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years if we don't have the net worth to support that kind of a loss. So right now our net worth is somewhere around $160,000 around there. If we took a $20,000 loss on a car, that's a lot compared to our net worth.
And we're not against buying things that go down in value, whether it be for entertainment, utility, or whatever. But if that's all or most of what you buy, that's going to create a problem and put downward pressure on your net worth.
So what you should think about buying instead are things that go up in value. So things like stocks or index funds or real estate, or maybe things you can find on Facebook Marketplace that you can buy and then flip for a profit. Doing this will make your net worth go up over time rather than down, and will make you more financially independent.
And number 9, grocery shopping while hungry. Every time Mike and I have done this, we always end up buying more food than we need, and sometimes some of that food goes to waste. And if you're on a tight budget or not, it's a good idea not to go to the grocery store hungry, or else you'll be tempted to buy more food than you need and more food than you can eat, thus you'll end up wasting money.
And the 10th money habit you want to avoid is using a low interest savings account. So one of the banks we use has a 0.01% interest rate in their savings account, which means if we had $100,000 in there in our savings, we would get paid $10 in interest throughout the entire year, which is why we only have $40 in there, not $100,000 in there. So if you have cash sitting on the sidelines, especially an emergency fund or something like that, it's a good idea to research where you can get the most out of that while it's just sitting there. A lot of banks have really low interest savings accounts for whatever reason, but there are also some really good banks out there that have much higher interest savings accounts. Ally Bank, for example, which is a bank we've been using for a while, not sponsored, their savings account interest rate is 0.5%, which is 50 times more than the 0.01% what you get in a lot of banks out there. That's also going to be going up over the next couple of years, more than likely, as the Fed raises rates.
Another idea or option is you could split your emergency fund into 2 categories. So one that's short term, which you can put into a high interest savings account like Mike just talked about, like Ally. And for your long-term emergency fund, you can put it into something like a Roth IRA or a brokerage account where the potential for a lot higher gains is there, but you're exposed to more risk.
And number 11 is allowing bills to pile up and not paying them off immediately, especially on a credit card. So I'm the type of person, if I can't see something, I will forget about it. So if I get a bill in the mail and for whatever reason, like a bunch of other stuff gets piled on top of it, I'm gonna forget I ever got a bill in the first place, which obviously puts me at risk of paying for something late, which is a bad thing.
If there aren't any errors on the bills, we would just say pay it off immediately. Because having this cloud over your head that basically says, don't forget to pay me, is very distracting when you're trying to grow and build your wealth. And this is why it's so important, if you do have consumer debt, just to go ahead and pay it off so that way you can focus more on your future instead of your day-to-day.
Yeah, just get it out of your life. Get that cloud that's over your head constantly. Just bring the sunshine in.
And number 12, buying things without a purpose.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to having goals with your money and properly budgeting. So Tony Robbins once said that activity without purpose is the drain of your life. And if you're buying things without a purpose, this will drain your bank account and likely cause you to be more susceptible to impulse buying and just buying things that you may use once and then just collect dust for the rest of your life. Number 13 is surrounding yourself with negativity.
This one may not sound like it has anything to do with money, but it absolutely does. If the people you're around all day are negative, gossip, or blame other people for all their problems, this attitude will start to rub off on you and make its way into your finances by making you think your success or your failures are dependent on other people. When
in reality, your success is 100% dependent upon you. So what we'd recommend instead is just to surround yourself with people who are successful, people who have a positive kind of like, they're gonna go out and take life by the horns, so their mindset can rub off on you instead.
And the last habit we'll be going over today is number 14, which is trading time for money.
Yeah, and this is one we wish we had more time to get into, guys, and more fully develop. But we'll just say this off the bat, there's nothing wrong with working for an hourly wage or like working on a salary, something like that, getting paid by the hour. However, what you need to realize by doing this is that your income will always be limited under this work model because the number of hours you can work in a day will always be limited. So the solution here, and there are many solutions. One would be start maybe thinking of passive income sources you could start developing where you make something once and then it can earn money for you for the rest of your life or many, many years to come. So things like investing in the stock market where, you know, stocks or index funds that you're investing in pay dividends, or maybe writing a book once that you can sell to millions of people after that, or learning how to write a song or learning how to do fine art photography where you can make something once and then have other people buy from you for the rest of your life. So another solution is instead of maybe working for money, you work for profits. And your income here is still going to be limited, but not nearly as much as it would be if you're just working like on an hourly rate. So for example, let's say you're working at a furniture store and you could either work on an hourly rate of maybe like $15 an hour, or you could work for profits on sofa sales.
Like a commission.
Let's say the sofas you're selling cost $2,000 a piece and you make 10%. You could potentially make a lot more money in an hour selling sofas if you just sell a few sofas than you would be working for $15 an hour, something like that. Just a very rough idea, something to think about. So in summary, guys, be the captain of your own ship. Be purposeful with your money, be intentional with your money, pay attention to what you're doing, have goals for your money and for your future, and then pursue those goals courageously. We hope this video was helpful or entertaining maybe, or educational. If it was, please hit that thumbs up button. It helps us out tremendously.
You can subscribe for more, and you can also follow us on Instagram at It's Mike and Brit. We post there every now and then.
Yeah, thanks again, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.